You won't regret it, I promise. Please, subscribe. My name is Jack Mercer, and my son disowned me over crystal goblets on Christmas night. That's how fast a family can rearrange itself. One toast, one smile, one sentence dressed up as kindness. Would you have raised your glass with him? Nodded along? Pretended to agree because it was easier? Tell me honestly, would you have spared me the humiliation? Or would you have joined the chorus? Be careful with your answer. It's not as simple as you think. Chicago has a way of sharpening sound in the winter. Even inside a house, you can feel the world outside bite. In Logan Square, where the L runs past like a steel spine rattling the city awake every 20 minutes. The cold slides in through the smallest cracks. That night the train moaned by, a far-off choir of iron, and the vibrations slipped under the windows of my old frame house, the one I bought on a machinist's wages, paid off during a recession, painted with my wife Grace's choice of pale blue shutters. Grace had been gone 6 years, but her touches remained. The porcelain set she loved, Elizabeth pattern, garland of light blue flowers around the rim. She always said it made meals feel like ceremonies. Tonight it was the stage for my trial. The cousins filled the dining room with polite laughter that rose and fell like steam. My daughter-in-law Ava orchestrated everything with a hand invisible to most. She chose the candles, the menu, the seating. My son Ethan, her willing co-star, sat at the head of the table where I once presided. Grace used to joke that he had my jawline and her eyes. Now, all I could see was the practiced smile of a man performing responsibility without quite knowing its cost. "Dad," Ethan said, standing with his glass. He wore a navy sweater that still had a fold mark from the box. He raised the glass high enough that everyone could see the tremor in his hand. His voice was warm, managerial, polite in the way a boss is when he's about to cut your hours. To what's best for the father, the room went silent. I heard the house creak, its wood bones shifting in the cold. I knew what was coming because someone had warned me a week earlier in a call from nowhere. But we'll get to that later. For now, I want you to stand with me in that dining room. Smell the roast turkey that still lingered in the air. See the reflection of flame on porcelain plates. Imagine being told, by your own blood, that your role has expired. Ava sat to his right, her smile as thin as a paper cut. If you've ever seen someone smile only with their lips, holding the rest of their face in reserve, you know exactly what she looked like. That smile didn't include me. She wore a white blouse, sharp and deliberate, the kind of white that announces itself in a room. Around her neck hung a necklace that reminded me of something I might have bought for Grace once, back when I still believed buying silence was the same as buying peace. Ava reached out and touched Ethan's sleeve with 2 fingers, a little cue. No words, just the push an actor needs to remember his next line. "We've been thinking," Ethan continued, glancing toward her before finishing the thought. "We think it's time to rethink roles." He swallowed. "The house, the finances, the day-to-day. It's getting hard. He said it like I hadn't worked shifts with no breaks. Hadn't paid mortgages through 4 recessions. Hadn't coaxed a dead furnace back to life with a screwdriver and prayer. Hadn't carried him fevered down 3 flights when the elevator failed. Hard. That word sat there on the table like a pit in a cherry pie, ready to crack a tooth. Ava added, soft and reasonable, "We only want what's best for you. Jack, we think for everyone's sake it might be time for you to step back, to be part of the family in a different way." "Different," I repeated. The word tasted flat, like water gone stale in the pipes. "That's right," she said, with a little nod of satisfaction. "Different." I looked down the table. The cousins were busy rearranging silverware, pretending to be invisible. One of them coughed into a napkin like a bad actor hitting a cue. My brother-in-law checked his phone under the tablecloth. No one wanted to be caught looking directly at me, the man of the hour, the accused who hadn't been given the courtesy of charges spelled out. Inside my chest, something old and familiar stirred, the urge to apologize, to make it easy, to vanish into usefulness, to say yes, of course, whatever helps. That had been my life's language. I was the man who swallowed his pride, so no one else would have to chew it. But the folder resting on my lap, the leather folder I'd carried into this dinner like contraband, reminded me that this time I had prepared. I wasn't going to disappear. Not again. Go on, I told Ethan. My voice was calm, almost gentle. The old me would have rushed in with apologies, offers, quick ways to smooth the tension. This version of me wanted to hear just how far they'd go. Ethan glanced around the table, looking for an ally. Ava squeezed his arm. Silent encouragement. It cleared his throat, his Adam's apple jerking like a lever. "We love you, Dad," he said, which is what people say when they're about to cut you out. "But you need rest. You need freedom. We think it would be better for you and for us if you let us take over some things. Let us." A phrase as soft as a blanket and just as smothering. The cousins nodded in small, uncertain bursts, like extras in a play who don't know their lines. Someone muttered, "That makes sense." Ava beamed as if she'd already won. I stayed silent because silence was new to me. Do you know how much power there is in saying nothing? Try it sometime, especially if you've spent your life filling every gap with apologies. Let silence do the work. It's heavier than words. The room tilted in that silence. The candles hissed faintly. The train outside rattled by again, metal gossip in the distance. I thought of Grace, who would have cut through this farce with a single sentence. She had a way of speaking that left no scraps. But Grace wasn't here. Only her porcelain, her tablecloth, her memory pressing down on me like a second skin. "Different," I said again. And then I smiled, not the smile they expected, but something thinner, edged. Because I knew what they didn't. This story wasn't finished. Not tonight. Not with a toast. And not with a son mistaking his wife's script for his own courage. A week before the toast, before the crystal caught candlelight and decided to be a gavel, my phone rang while I was counting pills into the Monday through Sunday clamshell Grace used to call my calendar of surrender. The voice didn't give a name. It didn't even try to be memorable. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes. You should know this. They've discussed declaring you unfit. They will try to use Christmas." Outside, Milwaukee Avenue looked rinsed with dishwater sky. The L rattled past the kitchen window like somebody shaking out a carpet. I pinched the bridge of my nose and felt the small heat of anger that belongs to men who have paid for things in cash and time and suddenly find the receipt missing. "Who is this?" I asked. Silence. Then the little electrical cough of a line disconnecting. The living hang up harder than the dead. I didn't call Ethan. I didn't even say his name out loud. I made coffee that tasted like it had been brewed through an old sweater. Then I dialed Cal Whitaker because I have always believed in one religious doctrine. Find the person who tells you the worst news without joy in it. Cal answered on the second ring. "Jack," he said, the way a man says a word he's used to saying before offering bad coffee and a better chair. "You sound like weather moving in." "Someone called," I told him. "Said they're planning to make me unfit. Use Christmas to do it." He didn't say impossible. He didn't say they'd never. He said, "Do you trust the caller?" "No." "Good," he said. "Trusting the anonymous is how you lose your name. Come into the loop tomorrow. Ortiz on LaSalle, 9 sharp. Bring what you have, which I assume is too little and too much." "What do I bring?" I asked, stupidly. "Everything," he said. "And also your patience." The next morning, the wind off the lake polished the buildings until they looked like expensive lies. I rode the blue line in with the traders and baristas, the noses above masks, the earbuds that said, "I am elsewhere. Do not talk to me." LaSalle Street breathed out cold air when the doors slid open. I walked the canyon between bank facades, staring up at stone that wanted me to feel small and succeeded for a block or two. Ortiz's office was on the 12th floor of a building with a lobby like a marble argument. A young woman with a crescent moon tattoo behind her ear took my coat and my name with equal care. Cal was already there, fondling the edge of a legal pad like it had wronged him. "Jack," he said, standing. "This is Daniel Ortiz." Ortiz was younger than I'd expected, 40, maybe, but he had the stillness some men spend their whole lives trying to learn. His tie was the color of a winter river. His voice was the sound a scalpel would make if it apologized before it cut. "I'm sorry you have to be here," he said, "but I'm glad you came before Christmas." He gestured toward a chair. "Tell me what you know." I told him the little I knew and the lot I feared. The anonymous call. The late notices Ethan called oversights. The way Ava's smile never found her eyes. I mentioned the old joint account that was supposed to be closed and wasn't. A leak I had stepped over for years, as if it were part of the floor. Ortiz didn't write much. He watched me like a man listening for a train before he put his head on the tracks. "We'll need to do 3 things quickly," he said at last. 1. Move title on the house into a revocable trust with you as trustee. 2. Close or freeze any account Ethan can touch, even by accident. 3. Document. Document everything. Not for a fight necessarily, but because memory is a traitor when it's tired. Cal interlaced his fingers. "I'll call Rhoda for the account search," he said. "She can find a penny rolling through a drain." "Do we have to do this?" I asked, hating the whine in my own question. Ortiz tilted his head. "We have to do what you'd regret not doing. If they mean you well, none of this hurts them. It only clarifies boundaries. If they don't, it saves you. Either way, you stop performing usefulness in a theater that stops selling tickets." I laughed then, a short, ugly sound. "I didn't realize I'd become a show." "Families are shows," Cal said, not unkindly. "We audition for the parts we already play. Paperwork has a smell, toner, coffee, a little panic." We began. Ortiz's assistant slid in with forms like a dealer distributing a cleaner kind of vice. I signed, initialed, consented, acknowledged, appointed. Every stroke of my pen felt like both a theft and a rescue. "Who gets what?" Ortiz asked. "Grace kept a folder," I said, and then I stopped, because the folder lived in a drawer that lived in a sideboard that lived in the dining room where, 1 week from now, I would set a different folder on a table like a quiet bomb. "The house should stop being a question," I said finally. "It's not theirs to answer." "We'll draft a trust today," Ortiz said. "We can file the memorandum of trust with the recorder's office tomorrow. As for the joint account," he looked at Cal. "Rhoda already texted," Cal said, reading his phone. "There's a credit card you didn't know you co-signed. Small balance, not small principal." I swallowed the old man's humiliation that tastes like metal. "Freeze it," I said. "Done," Cal replied, thumbs moving. He looked up. "You're doing fine." I didn't feel fine. I felt like a man who had worn other people's comfort for so long he no longer recognized the weight of his own coat. We took a break. In the hallway, a window framed the city like a postcard. Willis Tower in its dark confidence, the river a strip of dull silver. I pressed my palm to the glass as if the whole place were a dog I could quiet with a touch. "He was a good kid," I said without intending to. Cal nodded. "So we're a lot of men who learned the wrong lesson from being loved." "What lesson is that?" "That your father will always stand between you and consequence. You train a boy to believe he lives in a world with no edges. He will find ways to fall anyway." I wanted to argue. I wanted to say Ethan had also been attentive, generous in small, inconsistent ways. Memory is a biased witness. It prefers the flattering light. Back in the conference room, Ortiz had laid out a diagram of the trust like a subway map. Boxes and arrows. House gives Jack as trustee. Successor trustee gives independent. Distribution gives at Jack's discretion. It felt obscene to look at my life this way, but also God forgive me clean. "You'll keep living there as you do now," Ortiz said. "This just means the house is not the lever anyone else can pull. If you want to move, you decide. If you want to sell, you decide. If you want to keep the shutters Grace picked until they peel into blue confetti, you decide." I nodded. I thought of Grace's hands holding a paint chip up to the light. "She liked the way it made the snow look kinder," I said. "Then let it be kinder to you," Ortiz said. By noon, I had signed enough to warrant a confession. We ate sandwiches that tasted like office competent, forgettable. Ortiz gave me a list. Gather statements, pull copies of messages, print anything that might swim away if a phone fell in the sink. "We're not weaponizing," he reminded me. "We're building a record." I took the blue line back out toward Wicker Park and sat in a cafe that still smelled faintly of wet wool, the way places do when coats dry on chairbacks. I spread my life across a table. Bank printouts, screenshots, a little notebook Grace had kept in the junk drawer for grocery lists and sudden thoughts. Under a shopping list, eggs, rosemary, nutmeg she had once written, Jack is kind when he is tired. I traced the writing with my thumb until the paper got soft. Is it cruelty to become the man your dead wife hoped you'd be? Or is it a different kind of fidelity? At home, I opened the sideboard and took out Grace's old folder, the one marked house, long-term in her steady teacher's hand. Deeds, insurance, a photograph of the house the year we bought it, shutters still white, snow stacked like folded sheets along the porch rail. I added to it the new papers Ortiz had given me. The folder breathed heavier now, like a book with a secret chapter. That week became a discipline. Mornings at the Daily Center, where the elevators smell like thousands of coats in winter, and the security line moves with the patience of saints. Afternoons scanning, printing, stacking. Evenings learning how to say no without apology, and then not rushing to soften it with but. I practiced in small ways. At the grocery, do you need help finding anything, sir? No, thank you. At the pharmacy, any questions about your medication today? No. At night, alone in the kitchen, I said it out loud, to the sink, to the radiator, to Grace's photograph. No. The house listened. The house, I think, approved. The day before Christmas Eve, Ava called. We're excited for tomorrow, she said, cheerful as a hostess introducing a game. I know the holidays can be hard, but I think you'll feel relieved. We've taken care of everything. What have you taken care of? I asked. Oh, just details, she said. You don't need to worry. I always worried more when told not to. See you tomorrow, I said, and hung up before my voice could betray the old habit of asking how can I help. That night, I woke at 3 and walked the house barefoot. The wood pressed its cold advice into my arches. I stood in the doorway of the room that had been Ethan's and looked at the dent in the drywall where a bed frame had once kissed too hard. I remembered the time he broke his wrist falling off a skateboard, and I told him. Through tears, we both pretended weren't there. Pain teaches, buddy. He had nodded like a man making a deal with a god. When did we stop sharing a language? Christmas came like it always does, with a sky that can't decide if it wants to be kind, and a wind that has already decided not to be. I ironed the tablecloth the way Grace had taught me, long strokes. Let the steam do half the work. I took the leather folder from the desk drawer and slid the documents inside. Trust papers, statements, a simple letter in my hand that began, Son, a boundary is not an attack. It's a door frame. I tucked the folder under my arm and told myself I would not detonate it in the room. I would set it down. I would leave. Let the reading happen in a quieter air. You know about the toast. You know about the word different and how politely some people say go away. Ethan's voice had the earnestness of a man who thinks sincerity is the same as truth. The cousins watched their knives become mirrors. The candles trembled as if they knew they were theater. I have something, I said finally, after letting the room perform its well-meaning cruelty. I stood and placed the folder on the tablecloth. My fingers found the old scorch mark Grace never could lift, a reminder that even careful people burn things sometimes. Dad, not now, Ethan hissed, because of course it was always either too early or too late for my needs. This is supposed to be kind? I asked. He looked at Ava, who pressed his sleeve again, the conductor's cue disguised as affection. I didn't open the folder. I didn't explain. I said, read it later, when the house is quiet and the candles have drowned in their own wax. Then I put on my coat and stepped into the winter, because the only way to teach a room to miss you is to leave it. The lake wind cut at Milwaukee like a surgeon who bills by the stitch. My breath made small gray ghosts that looked embarrassed to be seen. The bus shelter hummed its pale electricity. I called Cal. Tell me you brought the folder, he said. I did. And you didn't spill its guts like a stage magician from a county fair. I didn't, I said. I set it down. Good. Tomorrow. Ortiz. 9. Let him open it where carpets don't learn the wrong lesson. He paused. How are you, Jack? Light, I said. And empty. Both can hold good things, he said. I ended the call and crossed back toward the house, not to re-enter, but to pass by like a stranger, testing a window's warmth with the back of his hand. My phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Did you bring it? The voice asked. Female, maybe. Young, maybe. Or just wearing a young person's certainty. I set it on the table, I said. Good, the voice said. Now don't let them pin you to the night. Let the paper do the talking while the room forgets its lines. Who are you? I asked. Why do you care? A small breath, the sound a match makes when it gives up. I'm a distance, the voice said. Between what they say and what they did, the line went dead. I stared at my reflection in the bus shelter glass, an older man in a coat that had learned his shape too well. Behind me, the house glowed like a patient. A message chimed from an email address I didn't recognize, a single attachment, a scan of a draft petition with my name on it, dated for the week after Christmas. In the matter of the guardianship of John Mercer, my stomach went cold. There was a note under the PDF. You were not meant to see this. I looked up at the windows. Somewhere inside, my son was deciding whether to open a folder. Out here, I opened mine, the part of me that still believed in mercy and felt the wind climb in. Tomorrow, 9 LaSalle Street. We would see who taught lessons and who learned them. And if you're asking whether I was afraid, yes. Bravery is a jacket you put on over shaking arms. Morning in Chicago tastes like burnt coffee and iron. I rode the blue line back into the loop with a folder, clutched to my chest the way a child clutches homework he hopes the teacher won't grade too harshly. The city outside the windows slid by in layers of gray. Viaduct graffiti, frozen puddles, the anonymous faces of commuters who looked everywhere but at one another. I was one of them, but also not. I was a man preparing to make himself real on paper before his own son managed to erase him. Ortiz's office smelled of toner and determination. Cal was already in the conference room, coat draped on a chair, tapping a pen like it was a slow metronome. Ortiz entered with the calm of a surgeon who'd already scrubbed it in. He placed a stack of documents on the table that looked both ordinary and dangerous. First things first, Ortiz said, sliding the papers toward me. This is the memorandum of trust. Once recorded, the house can't be moved without you. Not Ethan, not Ava, not anyone else. I signed. The pen felt heavier than its weight, like it knew it was drawing a border around my life. It was Grace's house as much as mine, I said. She chose the shutters, the garden soil, the curtains that never quite matched. I want it to remain hers, even if she's gone. Ortiz nodded. Then let the law honor that. The dead deserve their boundaries, too. Cal leaned forward. Rhoda found 3 accounts. 2 were small. 1 isn't. He passed me a printout. Ethan's name was there, next to mine, a relic of years when I thought merging finances meant merging loyalty. The balance wasn't catastrophic, but it was enough to feel like betrayal with a decimal point. I forgot about this, I admitted. My shame tasted like rust. Not forgotten, Cal corrected. Conveniently ignored. You wanted to believe helping him was still fatherhood. Ortiz tapped the page. We freeze it. If he objects, he explains to a judge why he deserves access. Let's see if he enjoys daylight. Daylight. That word comforted me. Not victory, not revenge, just daylight. We moved on to documentation. Ortiz had me spread my notes, screenshots, printouts across the table like a gambler laying down a hand. Text from Ethan about modernizing the place. A voicemail in his easy voice. Dad will be happier once he's not involved. Late fees marked in red. Ava's emails about leveraging assets. Ortiz's assistant copied and cataloged everything with the patience of a mortician. Every page slid into a folder labeled Mercer Guardianship Defense. When I saw those words in block letters, my chest burned. Guardianship. As if I were already a child again, waiting for permission to go outside. As if I hadn't carried Ethan on my shoulders across Navy Pier, while Grace laughed at how he flapped his arms like wings. We'll file a notice of appearance preemptively, Ortiz explained. If they attempt a petition, the court will already see resistance. You'll have counsel of record. They'll think twice. Cal chuckled without humor. Think twice, or double down. Either way, you won't be walking in naked. At lunch, we went to a diner near the courthouse, all linoleum and fried onions. I barely touched my sandwich. Cal chewed like a man grading the food on a curve. You're quiet, he said. I keep hearing his voice at 5 years old, I said. Running through the snow with mittens too big, calling me daddy. I don't know how that boy grew into a man who thinks I'm disposable. Because you trained him to believe you'd never leave, Cal said. You did your job too well. Now you're changing the terms. No one likes new terms. Do you think I'm being cruel? He set down his fork. Cruel men don't ask that question. They enjoy the certainty. Back in Ortiz's office, the assistant returned with a folder of fresh copies. Ortiz handed me a smaller envelope. Inside is a letter of intent, he said. If you choose, you can send this to Ethan before anything formal begins. It outlines the trust, the frozen accounts, and the expectation that you remain independent. Think of it as an invitation to act like family instead of adversaries. An invitation, I repeated, rolling the word around. Invitations could be declined, but at least it would be on record that I'd asked for decency. We wrapped up by mid-afternoon. The sky outside had already begun to dim. Chicago's winter clock, always too eager to end the day. I walked the Riverwalk before heading home, folder under my arm, the wind slicing off the water. The river was a sheet of dull pewter, indifferent, strong. I imagined Grace walking beside me, her gloved hand tucked into my elbow, whispering the kind of sensible reassurance that made a man believe he could face anything. Instead, I had the whistle of the wind and the ache in my knees. When I reached home, the house seemed to breathe differently. The walls, once conspirators in my invisibility, now felt like allies. I placed the folder on the dining table, right on top of Grace's porcelain runner. I stared at it for a long time. This was no longer just paper. It was a weapon, or maybe a shield, maybe both. That night, Ethan called. His number lit the phone like a flare. "Dad," he said, his tone strained. "We should talk. There are things you don't understand." "Then explain them," I said even. He hesitated. "Not on the phone. Tomorrow, at your place." "No," I said. The silence afterward felt enormous. "If you want to talk, we'll do it downtown. Ortiz's office. In daylight." "Dad, that's non-negotiable," I interrupted. My own voice startled me. Firm, calm, final. The silence stretched. Then the click of disconnection. I sat in the darkened kitchen with only the hum of the refrigerator for company. I wondered if I'd just slammed shut the last door to reconciliation. Then I thought of the guardianship petition, already drafted. No, the door had been closing for years. All I'd done tonight was stop holding it open. Before bed, I opened Grace's old folder again and added one more page. A handwritten note. "Ethan, my love for you is not in question. My trust in you is. Trust must be earned, even by sons." I closed the folder, slid it back into the drawer, and turned off the light. The house exhaled. Outside, the wind rattled the windows like knuckles on a door. "Ava, we should talk about her, shouldn't we? Every family betrayal has its chorus, its stagehands, its shadows in the wings, but sometimes it also has a director." When Ethan first brought her home, she was polite, bright, careful with her laughter. Grace liked her. I thought I did too. How many tragedies begin with, "I thought I did too"? I remember one Thanksgiving years ago. Grace had set the table with the same porcelain I still use, and Ava leaned across to help clear the plates. She touched my arm lightly and said, "You must be proud of Ethan." Simple words, right? Yet there was something under them, a glint not in her smile but behind it, as if she were auditioning me, testing how easy it would be to nod along. I nodded. I always nodded back then. After Grace died, Ava's presence in the family doubled. She planned the birthdays, organized the calls, even picked the restaurant for my 70th. Ethan seemed relieved. "She's good at this, Dad," he said. "You don't have to worry." But what happens when the person who volunteers to carry the load also starts drawing the map? That's how I became a guest in my own house. Slowly, subtly, so that by the time I noticed, the furniture had already been rearranged. The folder I set down on Christmas night carried not only deeds and statements, but also fragments of their schemes. One voicemail from Ethan, one email draft from Ava, one slip of arrogance too many. I left it unopened on purpose. Some truths explode more cleanly in silence than when defended aloud. The morning after Christmas, Ortiz's office became my refuge. The city was brittle with cold, and the loop's glass towers reflected a sky that had no intention of being kind. Cal sat with his usual half scowl, half grin, as if daring the world to surprise him. Ortiz laid out the situation plainly. The trust recorded, the accounts frozen, the guardianship petition already drafted against me. "They'll be furious," Ortiz said. "Expect it." Anger is the language of entitlement denied. Let them be angry, I answered, surprising myself. The words came out steady. For once, let them feel what I've swallowed for years. Later that afternoon, Ethan showed up unannounced at my door. He didn't knock. He tried the handle, found it locked, and rattled it like a landlord. I opened, but left the chain in place. His eyes flicked to it immediately. A son confronted with the idea his father might treat him as less than automatic family. "Dad," he said, forcing calm, "why make this hostile? We're just trying to help." "Help?" I said. "I've seen the petition. You wanted me unfit." His face drained of pretense. "Who showed you that? Does it matter?" Behind him, Ava's figure hovered by the car, arms folded, mouth thin. Ethan glanced back at her, then at me. That glance told me everything. The script was hers, the performance his. "You don't understand," he said. "This is bigger than—" "It's exactly as big as a house and a lifetime of accounts," I interrupted. "No bigger, no smaller." I closed the door gently, leaving the chain intact. Through the wood, I heard him mutter something to Ava, a tone equal parts plea and defeat. Then footsteps down the porch. The car door slammed. The engine carried them away. The days blurred. I kept to a routine. Mornings walking along the Riverwalk. Afternoons at Ortiz's office or the Daily Center. Evenings practicing silence in my house. But inside me, tension built. It had to break somewhere, and it did at the second Christmas dinner. Yes, they staged another one. Family loves repetition, even of cruelty. This time, the candles burned lower, the cousins quieter. Ethan raised his glass again, voice trembling. "To what's best for the father," he said, but the words cracked halfway. Ava's smile faltered when I stood, folder in hand. I opened it this time. One by one, I laid the documents on the table. Trust deed, frozen accounts, the draft petition. A gasp circled the table like a slow wind. The cousins stared at their plates. Ethan's voice collapsed into silence. Ava's pencil smile vanished completely, leaving her face naked, ordinary. "This," I said softly, "is what you thought was best for me, for us. Read it. Let the ink tell you what you wouldn't say to my face." The house itself seemed to listen. The pipes groaned. The chimney moaned with the Lake Michigan wind. Grace's photograph on the sideboard caught the light, her eyes meeting mine in a way that made me stronger. I didn't shout. I didn't argue. I simply left the papers on the table and walked out into the winter. Outside, the cold sliced me open, but also kept me awake. Cal called minutes later. "You did it, didn't you?" "I did," I said. And they looked small," I told him. For once, they looked small. That night, the anonymous caller reached me again. "You showed them?" the voice asked. "Yes." "Good. Now the real work begins." "Who are you?" I demanded. "Why help me?" "I'm not helping you," the voice said. "I'm reminding you you're not invisible. Don't waste the chance." And then, as always, the click. I lay awake for hours, the house dark, the city breathing outside my windows. Was I free? Was I cruel? Or was I only at the beginning of something harsher? Grace's memory weighed on me, but so did my own dignity, one I had already lost. The other I was finally learning to defend. The voice came again, sharper this time, as though distance itself had grown impatient. "You showed them," it said. Not a question. "I did," I answered. The house around me was still, but my chest thumped with the echo of my own choice. "Good. Now you understand. But understand this too. They will not stop. They cannot. Anger is heir to them." "Who are you?" I asked for the 100th time. "Why do you care if I fight back?" Silence hummed, then a low reply. "Because if you don't, they'll decide you never lived at all." The line died, leaving me with my breath and the faint crackle of old plaster in the walls. I wanted to believe I wasn't alone, that someone unseen stood beside me. Or was I just hearing my own buried will disguised as a stranger? Days stretched. Ethan avoided me. Ava's emails, once full of logistical cheer, stopped. The cousins remained politely absent. Only Cal checked in, his voice gruff but warm. "Keep steady, Jack," he said. Steady wins wars families pretend aren't wars. Yet the house itself became heavy, weighted with Grace's memory and my own humiliation replayed in every creak. I walked its rooms at night, touching walls that no longer wanted me, windows that seemed to look out at strangers. One morning, as snow slanted across the shutters Grace had once chosen for their kindness, I knew the house had done its work. It had sheltered me, witnessed me, betrayed me. It was time to let it go. I called a realtor. A young couple toured the place, their eyes wide, their hands brushing as though every doorway was a promise. They smiled the way Grace and I had smiled the first time we saw it. "It feels alive," the woman whispered. That was enough. Within weeks, the papers were signed. The house was no longer mine. I was lighter and lonelier at once. The night I handed over the keys, I walked the Riverwalk under orange lamps. The Chicago River glistened like a blade. My new apartment was smaller, brighter, overlooking the water instead of Ethan's disapproval. I set down one suitcase, one box of documents, one framed photograph of Grace. For the first time in months, the air in my lungs felt earned. The phone rang again. "You sold it," the voice said. "Yes. You're freer than they know." "And you?" I asked. "Why do I see you?" The pause was longer this time. "You don't. You only see yourself finally." The click. Always the click. But Ethan came. Of course he came. He knocked hard on the door of the apartment one evening, his anger too large for the hallway. "Dad, how could you? That house, it was supposed to be ours." "It was never yours," I said. "It was Grace's and mine, and now it belongs to two people who love it." His jaw tightened. "You've betrayed me." "No," I said calmly. "I've betrayed the habit of letting you decide my worth." Behind his fury, I saw the boy again, lost, astonished, grieving something he thought was promised. Ava wasn't there to script him, and without her cues, he looked like a man who had forgotten his lines. He left without slamming the door, which was the loudest silence of all. That night, I wrote him a letter. Not angry, not pleading, just final enough to sting. "Ethan, I forgive you partially. Enough to stop carrying this weight. But if you ever want full forgiveness, you'll need to stand as a man on your own, not as someone else's echo." I folded it, sealed it, mailed it. Not to wound, but to carve a line where the ground had been mud. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors with thresholds. If he wanted to cross, he would have to knock. So here I am, an older man in a small apartment with a view of the river. The sound of the L in the distance. The hum of the city that never cared enough to betray me. I meet with younger men at the Union Hall near Cermak, teaching them what no one taught me, how not to disappear inside their own families. I tell them silence is heavier than words, that a boundary is not cruelty, that forgiveness is a ration, not an endless supply. And sometimes, late at night, the phone rings again. I pick it up, half hoping, half dreading. "Jack," the voice says. Just that. Nothing more. Maybe it's real. Maybe it's only me. Either way, I answer. Because after everything, the worst thing isn't being tested or even betrayed. The worst thing is to go unheard. In the new apartment, silence had a different weight. It was no longer the silence of being ignored inside a crowded house. It was the silence of walls that belonged to me alone. The refrigerator hummed like a companion. The river outside glimmered with indifferent patience. I sat at the narrow desk that came with the place, paper in front of me, pen in hand, and decided that if words had wounded me, words would also become my defense. I wrote to Ethan, not an apology, not an accusation, something harder, the truth in careful strokes. "Ethan, my love for you is not in question. My trust in you is. Trust must be earned, even by sons. I forgive you partially not for your sake, but for mine. Enough to stop carrying this story like an anchor. But forgiveness is not endless. If you want the rest, you'll need to stand as a man on your own, not as someone else's echo." I folded the page, slid it into an envelope, and addressed it in the block letters Grace had always used for clarity. Dropping it in the mailbox felt like setting down a stone I'd been clutching unconsciously. My hand trembled afterward, not with regret, but with the strange lightness of no longer holding what was too heavy. That evening, Cal called. "You sound different," he said, hearing something in my voice I hadn't noticed. "I mailed him a letter," I said. "Not to fight, just to define." "Good," Cal said. "Definitions save men. Ambiguity kills them." Weeks passed. Ethan didn't reply, not directly. But one afternoon, a small box arrived at my door. No return address, but the handwriting on the label was his. Inside, an old photograph of us at Navy Pier. He was 6, perched on my shoulders, his arms flung wide like wings. Grace had taken the picture, her shadow visible at the corner. No note, just the image. I stared at it until the edges blurred. Was it apology? Was it accusation? Or was it simply memory offered as currency? I propped it on the shelf above the desk. Each morning, I glanced at it before walking to the Union Hall near Cermak, where I had begun mentoring 2 younger men. Both had stories too familiar, families that measured them only by what they provided, wives who edited their sentences before they were spoken, children who saw them as scaffolding rather than men. I told them what I had learned too late, that silence can be stronger than speech, that saying no without explanation is a complete sentence, that love without boundaries curdles into resentment. Don't vanish, I told them, not even for your children, especially not for your children. They'll never forgive you for disappearing, even if they begged you to. They nodded, uncertain but listening, and for the first time in years, I felt useful in a way that didn't erase me. One night, as I returned from the hall, I found Ethan waiting outside the apartment building. He wasn't angry this time. He wasn't rehearsed. He looked like a man who had missed a train and wasn't sure whether to run or let it go. We didn't speak long. He only said, "I got your letter." "I know," I said. "I got your photograph." His eyes softened for just a moment. Then he nodded, awkwardly, as though acknowledging a truce too fragile to name. He didn't ask to come upstairs. I didn't invite him. He walked away into the city night, shoulders hunched, hands deep in his coat pockets. I watched until the crowd swallowed him. Back inside, I stood at the window, the river a streak of black glass under the lamps. I pressed my hand to the cold pane. Grace would have wanted reconciliation. She believed in the stubborn glue of family, but she also believed in dignity. I think no. I hope she would have understood the letter. Chicago in late winter looks like a city that has fought too many battles with itself. The river is neither frozen nor free, just tired ice floating on reluctant current. The streets shine with salt, and the wind cuts even when it has softened. I walk it every morning now, down to the Union Hall on Cermak, where men younger than my son wait for someone to tell them they are more than their mistakes. It is the only pulpit I've ever believed in. Inside the hall, the air smells of coffee, steel, and ambition. I sit with the apprentices, men with hands already rough, but eyes still searching. I tell them stories without names, about fathers who gave everything until they had nothing, about sons who mistook generosity for weakness, about wives who confuse silence with agreement. They listen, not because I am wise, but because they know I have survived the same wound they carry half hidden. Draw a line, I tell them. Not to shut others out, but to know where you stand. A man who doesn't know his own edges will be erased by everyone else's needs. Some nod, some don't. Seeds sprout unevenly. At night, in the apartment overlooking the river, I sit with Grace's photograph and the one Ethan sent. I place them side by side. Her eyes, steady and kind. His arms spread wide like wings. The shadow of her hand on the corner of the frame. Past and present staring at each other through glass. I wonder what forgiveness looks like when the people who need it most are gone. One evening, the phone rang again. That voice, as steady and anonymous as ever. "Jack," it said, nothing more. "I've done everything," I replied into the dark. "The trust, the letter, the house. I've drawn the line. What else is left?" A pause, the faint hiss of distance. "To live behind it," the voice said. "To believe you're worth the space you've claimed." And then the click. Always the click. I sat in the silence afterward, wondering if I had invented the caller all along some phantom of my own will, conjured to drag me across the threshold of my old weakness. Does it matter? Perhaps not. Reality is just another word for what we can no longer deny. Ethan hasn't written again, but sometimes, on Sundays, I imagine him walking with Ava, silent between them, carrying the photograph of himself on my shoulders, and not knowing whether it is burden or gift. Maybe one day he will come back, not to claim the house, not to demand inheritance, but simply to sit. Until then, I have no obligation to be the floor beneath his feet. I've learned something cruel and clean. Love does not excuse erasure. A father can give without vanishing. A son can learn without conquering. The cost of daylight is seeing every crack, every scar, every unfinished corner. But daylight is still better than darkness. So here is where I leave you. An older man in a small apartment, staring at the river that refuses to freeze completely. My house is gone. My wealth is defended. My son is estranged, but not lost. I am lighter, emptier, lonelier, and more myself than I have ever been. Was it worth it? That's the question you're waiting for me to answer. I can't. Revenge never arrives without an invoice. Integrity, too, demands its price. But I can tell you this. When the wind cuts my face on Lakeshore Drive, I no longer wonder if I deserve the pain. It sharpens me. It tells me I am still here. And if you've ever been erased, if you've ever mistaken usefulness for love, maybe you understand. Maybe you know why a man would rather walk alone in the cold daylight than be warm and invisible at his own table. Thank you so much for watching. Your support is what makes this all possible. If you enjoyed the video, please share it with a friend and consider subscribing to the channel for more. I am truly grateful for your time. Thank you.